Good morning, everybody. Debrief of Sydney SuperNight, and plenty of very good questions. Once again, really pleased to answer your question, and more pleased even when the questions are very relevant and interesting to talk about. So, Simon, our 90-minute practice session, advantageous or lead to driver fatigue? We actually like the 90-minute session because they give you the ability to run a race setup for 45-50 minutes. So try to get a good understanding of what the race car wants. Then swap to a quali setup during the session, which is probably 10-15 minutes of downtime, and then run 2 or 3 sets of tires, one fresh, one new, maybe another new, and get a good guide and direction of what you need to do for the next day. It's really good, actually, if we get that session on the Friday so that we can think over it during Friday evening. The engineers are actually very busy on Friday and Saturday because that's actually their time for thinking and trying to change bits. And then on Saturday, we go to quali with a different setup if it's needed or small adjustments. So I do like the 90-minute session. You've got to realize that these guys are going to race at SMP for an example. I think we did 51 laps. We were doing 78 laps at Townsville. So they are trying to go 2.5 hours really into the car for a race. It can happen. So 90 minutes is not a lot of time. Plus on top of that, it's 90 minutes, but it's sequence of 10-15, 10-15. So it's not difficult. Next, Phil, can you describe the key factor that contributed to the top 10 quali on Sunday in Sydney? What adjustment made the biggest impact? I think the biggest impact is understanding what you were missing on Saturday and how you can achieve it on Sunday. And the example here is our car in qualifying was not getting temperature enough on the tire, grip. The tires were not ready for a 1 lap, which means we tried to do 3 runs of 1 lap, but it wasn't the best way. So on Sunday, we changed the setup, yes, we did some change, but we actually approached the qualifying differently. We said we are going to do 2 sessions during the quali session of 2 laps rather than 3 outing of 1 lap time, which means we actually didn't really perform on the first lap of each outing we did on Sunday. We did a slowish lap to warm up the tire and then the fast lap. And that was, so there's an out lap, then the slowish lap, then the fast lap. And that was the best way we found to get grip, to get performance out of the tire, and for team to basically perform the best Commodore on qualifying during the qualifying. The trouble with being, so that's very good, I'm happy with that, and that was good understanding of the strength of team and the car, and trying to apply the best we can. However, it has a downside on that particular day. We've got top 10 shootout. And the top 10 shootout is an exercise where you don't have an extra 1 lap to warm up the tire. So in the top 10 shootout, with the setup we decided to have and with team, we knew we were going not to be so competitive because of that element of not having the right temperature in the tire, and that's something which is, we need to work on how we can get that temperature on a 1 lap warming lap and then the flying lap during shootout. So the biggest difference probably from Saturday to Sunday is understanding and decided to play the game on a 2-lapper and 2-lapper rather than 3 times 1 lap, which didn't perform enough on Saturday. Matthew, are the boys facing greater tire degradation than others? Drop in pace seems to be more noticeable versus other team later in the stint. It is true, but if you look, we perform better overall in qualifying than we perform in race, which means we've got a higher drop in race. We haven't yet found a setup for both drivers. Sometimes Jimmy has had some very good race with low DEG late in the race. That was the case at Bathurst, at Darwin, etc. So there is places where he's actually been able. Team, I haven't found, and we haven't found, that sort of setup which allow to have that good drive, but with not, losing the rear on the way. On Sunday, Tim says himself, and we were debriefing this morning, it's the best car he's had all year in feel. So he could attack the corner, he didn't have too much understeer, and he had good drive. Unfortunately, we had a radio issue on the car. The pack of the radio failed, and we had to change it during pit stop, which means we miss the window of the pit stop, because when I called, the radio didn't work. Then by the time we put the boards, the visual board to tell him to come in, we lost 3 laps there, which were important. Then by changing the radio pack, we took some time in pit lane, so we put some more fuel, which we end up with a bit of a too heavy car, if you want, and not the position where we want it to be. So on Sunday, we didn't showcase that performance increase on team car, but it was there, and it was happier, definitely, with the car. So there's probably a couple of elements there that we are going to try to push forward for team to perform better and to have less DEG. But yes, it's one of the areas where we're trying to work hard. You still need to qualify very high, but we need to be able to race with not having in our mind, we may have to drop, pace towards the end. Gary, is Sydney Motorsport Park a high downforce track or a low one? Well, to me, it's a high downforce track. I would say just lower than Phillip Island, where we don't go racing anymore, but it's probably the second highest or the third highest with the band. The average speed is high, 160k. There's only one straight line with a big long corner at the end of it, so a fast corner, and the rest of the track is pretty average speed at 140, 150, 160, 170. So I call it a downforce track. Now, our cars don't have a lot of downforce these days, but and that's my philosophy. Again, everybody is different, and my philosophy is to put, a lot of pitch and, pitch the car and try to get a downforce from the positioning of the car, and then use that downforce with the suspension to still balance, not have too much, pitch sensitivity and turning oversteer. But yes, for me, it's a downforce track. David, what's your secret sauce there, Ludo, that Mark keep going on about? It's actually a funny one, I think, if I remember well, back in the Penske time. I think that was a reply from Roger to Roland Dane. I've got my secret sauce. And he was talking about me at the time. What's the secret sauce? Well, there is no secret sauce, but I do like qualifying laps. It's an exercise which I really enjoy, because most of the time, it's funny, you don't get paid for quali lap, so you get results at the end of the race. But most of the time, quali lap, there is nothing in your way. Bad pit stop, bad set of tires, traffic, etc. You can position yourself on the track when you want, as you want, and execute the lap. And that's something, which reward a lot, that relation between the engineer and the driver, of the moment. There is a moment, and I will probably always remember that one lap in 2017 of Scotty at Bathurst in the shootout. These are these moments, and because they are short during a small time, they are very intense. Where a race win is a race win, and it's beautiful to win a race, or a championship with a race win at the end. But it comes through a more long process, and maybe I focus more on the qualifying, or that's the secret sauce. I think the secret sauce, in all fairness, is understanding your driver and the car you've got at the time. It's not always the best driver, it's not always the best car, but you, by understanding and listening, you can actually nearly overachieve somewhere. Anthony, how difficult is it to set the car up from daytime qualifying to nighttime racing when the track temperature varies so much? It's a good question. It is difficult. It is difficult and can become extremely difficult when the tire is not in its window. And when I say in its window, tires work with temperature, which means the race compound, it's quite hard. We speak about soft tires and this and that. If you touch our tire that we run, cold at ambient temperature, 30 degrees, even in the sun, 30 degrees, they can feel a bit tacky sometimes at 30 degrees, but they are not soft physically. They need to get to 60 to 80 degrees to actually get real soft and penetrate the ground. And I'm speaking compared to your road tire. Your road tire have got a shortness which is usually lower, but that's sort of, low density and is the same on every temperature. So the road tire that you've got on your car doesn't change from temperature. For us, to get the performance on the car, we need to get a certain level of temperature. And in a window, which is between 60 to 80, 90 degrees, the compound works really well, race compound. And then when it gets too hot, it starts to be too much and then start to work really bad. So too low on temperature, you've got no grip, no contact patch, no feel of the car. Just in the right temperature, it's great. And then past that, you start sliding around. And the more you slide, the more you induce temperature, the worse the tire feels. So you imagine that when the track varies by 10 or 15 degrees, it has a clear influence on the temperature of the compound. And that's where it becomes difficult. So sometimes you'd run more camber that you need to overheat the tire because it's not getting enough heat. So that overheat is going to get you just the heat you needed. Sometimes it's the opposite. It's too hot, and the last thing you need is to overheat a side of the temperature. So you're running no camber. So it's not only related to the grip level or how much roll the car has. It's actually trying to adapt, and that's very difficult. And nobody has got a perfect answer. You think one day you've got it, and then the next day you don't. So it's just listening and looking at tires all the time, which allow you to probably be closer. But it's very difficult to actually change the behavior of the tire with the setup and adapt from a low temperature to a high temperature. Stephen, based on data collected and the team performance, what area will you focus on for improving in the upcoming races? We are in a middle zone. Sometimes we perform. We are still very, very erratic in our result. We come to a race weekend and we are poor. The good thing at SMP, we were not really good on Friday, but at least we turn up on Saturday average, and on Sunday we are two better cars in the top 10. So that was a positive from the group. I like that. What have we learned? There was two different philosophies on both cars. I think Jimmy stayed in his area where he feels good, and that was a good call because we need to have a solid car so that when the other car does different things, we can attach to it and say, yeah, oh, it's going better. Yeah, that's probably a good idea. Oh, it's going down. And then the other car can look and understand and move forward with us. So the upcoming races are interesting. We are going to go to a low temperature track, obviously, in Tasmania. Long straight line. It's more of a drag strip than a real racetrack in saying that the drag element is very important. So that's going to be something we need to adapt to. Then we go to a Sandown, which is pretty fast, 265 to 70k, very bumpy, it's an old surface, and Kirby. So a bit of Townsville, a bit of Sydney in terms of high speed, or it's going to be a mix-up. What are we going to try to push forward? We've got a bit of stability on the way in, that's a positive. Both cars were about stable on the way in. We need to shave some understeer, which we have. There's a couple of elements we found which can help, but sometimes it's affect the drivability of the car out of a corner and its performance out of a corner. So it's a balancing act in between that, stability on the way in, good turn, and having enough drive to perform well. So there's a couple of little things we've done better. The most important element is to try as a group of engineers to understand the car, understand the element that change the car in a way which is consistent. So we do it one day, we do it the second day, and it's always doing that. And when we get a good picture, a good understanding of the car and the setups, we can physically move forward during session and come to racetrack with a better understanding of the car and being closer to what it needs. Brandon, what were the strategic decisions behind the pit stop timing during the race, and how did those choices affect overall performance? So, interesting question. Again, pit stop strategy. We went to Sydney thinking that the two-stop free stint was going to be a better solution. And again, you've got to ride your horse. You look at another car and they do something different with a different driver, and that works. That doesn't mean that it will work for Tim and his Chevy. Hence, we decided for a two-stop because we are concerned and we understand that our long, at least at Sydney, our pace later in the stint is not great. So rather than spending too much time late in the stint, which is doing 2 stints only, we'd rather do 3 stints shorter, where our pace earlier on is good, then degrade a bit, but not too much. Then we put new fresh tires, go again and go again. Now you've got to go and to gain another 40 seconds nearly in doing so, because that's 38.5 is the time in pit lane, because the fuel cover the tires. So somewhere, for us, the strategy was always going to be a two-stopper. And when you do a two-stopper, what you want to be doing is stop not too late earlier on, so that when you get back on the track, you can go fast and, undercut people. In doing so, you don't want to have a too long stint towards the end, because you've got, this sort of a tire issue. So for us, the strategy was clear, and that's how we decided to go. On Sunday, the track was a bit faster, and if you were to drive a little bit under the car, so not go too hard, all of a sudden you could probably make a one-stop, a two-stint, a one-stop work, even with our car. But that was only the fact that the track actually got better over the weekend. And I think more people decided to go for a one-stopper, and some of them on the fly. I think Cam Waters did that on the fly. He realized that the car was good and didn't wear tires, so he just, tried to extend the first session, the first stop, and then did a one-stopper, and which worked for him. I think Will Brown decided right from the start to do a one-stopper, thinking if you don't drive too hard, you're probably, and it worked for him too. Have we missed something? Maybe, it happens, but that was the decision that we took with the driver. So at some stage, the engineer can't just venture on his own and say that's how we do it. You need to buy into things, and it's important that driver and engineer talk and look at the solution together, and the solution was a two-stopper for us. Matthew, Timmy's car seems to spend more time on the patch than the racetrack. What's the benefit to short brief run than an alternative when it comes to accumulating data. There's two elements on it. I like to be on track. I don't like to be in the pits. But in the same time, there is no point being on track with a car which doesn't perform. I think we've had a couple of race weekends where we came in not where we wanted to be, and you've got to do more changes, which means spend a bit more time. We've got young crew on the car. They don't, they're still learning to work together, etc. So rather than rush, change, and make a mistake, we make sure that we take our time, we make the right change. Between me and the driver, we need to choose the right change, and then we make sure that the change which is done on the car is right. So it takes a bit more time. I'd love to do 2 or 3 more laps compared to be 4 or 5 minutes more in pit lane. However, it's a balancing. The 90 minutes anyway is a very long time. We don't have that many tires. We only do 1 run on the last set because we need to carry over. We give it back, and it comes back to our bank into Arundel. So we'll use that for testing. We'll use that for going to another race. So only 1 lap, which means for the, let's say, 80 minutes which are left, we've got 2 sets of tires. And to be fair, one does 70 or 65 minutes, and the other one will do 1 run and maybe a second run. So it's actually, in reality, we are running with 1 set of tire for nearly the entire session, and we just do a couple of quick laps on green sets or very fresh sets, which we don't want to burn anyway because we need them either for racing, either for testing later on. Hope this helped, and see you soon. Thank you.